In 1951, Iran made a bold decision that shocked the Western world. It nationalized its oil industry. Within 2 years, the CIA and MI6 would engineer a coup that changed the country forever. But the true cost took decades to reveal. The Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, or AIOC, dominated Iran's oil fields for decades. At the heart of its empire stood the Abadan refinery, one of the largest in the world by the late 1940s. British engineers and managers lived in exclusive compounds, enjoying modern amenities, while Iranian workers labored in harsh conditions for a fraction of the pay. Company ledgers from this period show that Iran received only 10% of AIOC's net profits, despite the oil being extracted from Iranian soil. In 1950 alone, AIOC reported net earnings of £40 million, yet Iran's share was just £4 million. The refinery's output, over 250 million barrels in some years, fueled Britain's post-war recovery, but left Iranian communities underdeveloped and resentful. Concession maps from the era reveal vast tracts of land under foreign control, reinforcing a sense of exclusion among Iranians. For many, Abadan became a symbol of lost sovereignty and economic injustice, laying the groundwork for demands to reclaim national resources. In March 1951, Iran's parliament, the Majlis, voted to nationalize the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, ending nearly half a century of foreign control over the country's most valuable resource. Mohammad Mossadegh, newly appointed as Prime Minister, signed the decree establishing the National Iranian Oil Company, called NIOC, to oversee all production and exports. The nationalization law, passed with 100 votes in favor and 32 against, transferred ownership of the Abadan refinery and all related assets to the Iranian state. Across the country, crowds gathered in support, hailing the move as a restoration of sovereignty and economic justice. But the reaction abroad was swift. Within weeks, Britain imposed a sweeping embargo, blocking Iranian oil from world markets. Tankers stopped arriving at Abadan, and export figures collapsed, dropping from 70% of Iran's total exports to less than 30% in a single year. As the economic pressure mounted, Mossadegh's government faced an escalating crisis, both at home and in its dealings with foreign powers. Diplomatic cables from the British Foreign Office in early 1953 pressed Washington to take a more active role in Iran. British officials argued that the oil embargo alone was not enough to break the deadlock, and warned that continued instability could open the door to Soviet influence. Their messages described the Tudeh Party, Iran's main communist group, as poised to exploit economic hardship and political disarray. American policymakers reviewing these appeals began to see the crisis as more than a commercial dispute. In April 1953, the U.S. National Security Council debated the situation in Iran, weighing British intelligence against their own reports from Tehran. Meeting minutes from that month show a growing consensus. If Mossadegh's government collapsed under pressure, the Soviet Union might gain a foothold on the Persian Gulf. This security framing shifted the debate in Washington. Instead of focusing solely on oil revenues or property rights, officials now saw Iran as a potential front in the Cold War. The search for a solution moved from diplomatic negotiation toward covert planning. The covert operation to remove Mohammad Mossadegh began under the code name TP Ajax. Planning started in early 1953 as the CIA and MI6 moved from economic pressure to a full-scale regime change strategy. Kermit Roosevelt Jr., the chief operative for the CIA in Tehran, took charge of local execution. He worked closely with British intelligence and Iranian allies, managing a secret budget of $1 million, an amount authorized by Washington and delivered to the US Embassy in diplomatic pouches. The plan relied on a mix of propaganda, bribery, and direct action. CIA and MI6 operatives mapped out a three-stage blueprint. First, to spread false reports of Mossadegh's resignation. Second, to organize pro-Shah demonstrations through paid street gangs. Third, to seize control of key institutions like Parliament and the national radio station. Cash disbursement networks reached deep into Iranian society. Political opponents of Mossadegh, street agitators, and even police officers received payments. British and American agents bought up space in major newspapers such as Kayhan and Etalat, planting stories and editorials that questioned Mossadegh's legitimacy. Leaflets, radio broadcasts, and sound trucks amplified the message. As the summer wore on, these efforts set the stage for a confrontation in the streets of Tehran, with both sides preparing for the decisive days ahead. On August 19, 1953, Tehran erupted in chaos as rival groups clashed in the streets. In the early hours, military units loyal to General Fazlollah Zahedi moved swiftly to seize control of key sites, including the Parliament building and the national radio station. Radio broadcasts announced a new government under the Shah's authority, amplifying the sense of a turning tide. Pro-Shah demonstrators, some recruited and paid by Coup organizers, overwhelmed Mossadegh's supporters. By midday, Mossadegh's house was surrounded, and he was arrested along with several cabinet members. With Zahedi's forces in command, the operation's objective was realized. The Shah's rule was restored, and Iran's government was fundamentally changed in a single day. The Shah's return brought sweeping changes. In 1954, a new oil consortium restored Western companies' control over Iranian production, granting them a 40% equity stake, while Iran received only a share of the profits. 3 years later, the Shah signed a royal decree founding SAVAK, the secret police responsible for suppressing dissent and monitoring political opposition. These moves consolidated power at the top, but also deepened public resentment and laid the groundwork for future unrest. Today, foreign intervention and oil politics still shape global power. The legacy of 1953 endures in every debate over sovereignty, energy, and trust. History's consequences remain close. Thanks for watching.